The following video essay contains major spoilers for Arcane Season 1, so if you haven't seen Arcane, please go and see it, it's fantastic, and when you're done, come back here. There are many reasons why I love Arcane. I love its stunning and innovative art style, its complex and compelling cast of characters, and its seamless integration of multiple character arcs into one larger story, but my absolute favourite thing about Arcane is Jinx, the bad guy. There are plenty of amazing villain archetypes out there. There are villains who are fallen heroes, fighting a battle within themselves as well as a battle with the protagonist. There are villains who are mindless monsters, testing the hero's utmost limits with their savage strength. And then there are villains who are madmen with a point to prove, stopping at nothing until they've beaten the world into the sinister shape they've always envisioned. As great as these villains are, not one of them is Jinx. Throughout Arcane, Jinx's journey of personal growth is bookmarked by burning buildings and lifeless bodies, but that doesn't stop us from rooting for her. I know this sounds like Jinx is just another sympathetic villain, but that label hardly does her justice, as she's much more than that. She's not just a sympathetic villain, she's a villain that we're taught to see as a hero. The way this is done is through a really clever rework of the hero's journey story structure. Rather than use it to bring us closer to its heroes, Arcane uses the sympathetic story structure of the hero's journey to tell the origin story of its greatest villain. The show constantly tests the audience's connection to Jinx, making Jinx's shining moments of triumph in her story moments of tragedy in everyone else's, and they achieve that by constructing an anti-hero's journey for Jinx. Okay, just to be clear, by that I don't mean that Jinx is an anti-hero, which is a morally ambiguous protagonist character with very little or zero heroic traits. I mean that Jinx is a protagonist that goes on a hero's journey that's twisted in the direction of villainy, making her hero's journey an anti-hero's journey. To avoid having to stress anti over and over again, let's call Jinx's journey the inverse hero's journey. In this video essay, I'm going to talk about how the show carefully constructs this arc, walking the line between making Jinx someone we love and someone we fear. Before we get started though, I need to stress that there will be full spoilers for Arcane Season 1 here, so please watch the show first before you proceed any further. It's an amazing show and I promise you won't regret it. Okay, with that out of the way, let's look at how Arcane masterfully tells the story of Jinx and her inverse hero's journey. As I mentioned earlier, a large part of what makes Jinx's story so brilliant is the genius ways in which it reworks the hero's journey. If you're unfamiliar with the hero's journey, that's only because you haven't seen it transparently laid out before. After I run through the stages of it now, I'm pretty sure you'll recognise it. The hero's journey is Joseph Campbell's theory about what he believed to be the optimal story structure for a hero. A story structure that is so perfect for hero stories that it appears in a lot of them, everything from ancient myths and legends to Wreck-It Ralph. The hero's journey has three main stages, all of which are nicely illustrated by the Star Wars original trilogy. In stage 1 of the hero's journey, the hero is called upon for an adventure, but they feel that they can't answer the call, and so they refuse it. Later, the hero is confronted with something that compels them to embark upon the adventure they once refused to go on, and they receive the aid of a mentor figure, someone who sees the hero's potential and helps them learn how to tap into it. With their mentor's guidance, the hero finds the power within themselves to take their first step into a new world and begin their hero's journey. In stage 2 of the hero's journey, the hero faces a number of challenges, each and every one of them teaching the hero something new that allows them to slowly grow. As the hero progresses through these tests, they soon face a challenge that surpasses everything else they've conquered, something strong enough to shatter their heroic aspirations and make the hero abandon their journey forever. Through an incredible struggle, the hero survives this, but the ordeal of facing it takes a heavy toll, forcing them through a spiritual death and rebirth. This experience triggers their transformation into the person they need to be to face one last trial. In stage 3 of the hero's journey, the newly transformed hero faces their ultimate enemy, using all of the powers they've gained and lessons they've learned to overcome their greatest challenge. In doing so, the hero proves that they have a complete understanding of who they are, and they make a triumphant return home with this hard-won self-enlightenment. The hero's journey template is used in a lot of stories, and for good reason. It produces heroes that we intimately understand, as their journey of discovering who they are and learning how to embrace that mirrors much of our own journeys through life. Arcane uses many of the conventions of the hero's journey, making full use of their power to make us sympathise with the protagonist and see ourselves in them, but it does so to tell the story of the bad guy. It's the contrast between the sympathetic way Jinx's story is told and the sinister way her story plays out that makes Jinx such an incredibly complicated and challenging character. As we talk about Jinx's story now, I'll show the moments in which the series makes use of the hero's journey to tell Jinx's story, and then I'll go a little deeper into what makes these moments so clever. When we first meet Jinx, she's Powder, the youngest member of a group of amateur thieves, and also the most amateur among these amateur thieves. She makes a valiant effort to keep up with them as they skillfully manoeuvre their way across the Piltover rooftops, but try as she might, this really isn't where she shines. Despite her being the weakest link here, she's still driven and determined to be a part of the team and prove herself, and we want to see her succeed by finding her own unique power. As the episode continues, we get our first hint at what this unique power might be, as Powder stumbles upon a set of blue magic stones. In this reflective shot, she literally sees herself in them, suggesting that they might be the key to unlocking Powder's true potential. After this, the group get into a big fight, and everyone gets their own cool moment, with the exception of Powder. Whilst the others fight with their fists and do pretty well, Powder tries her own solution when she pulls out this small grenade, which gives us our first look at what her talent is. She's an inventor, albeit an amateur one, and we see that when her invention fails. We feel even more sympathy for her now, as we see that she has a gift, something that sets her apart from everyone else, but she hasn't proved herself with it yet. The next episode shows us more of Powder's technological savviness, but it also introduces us to her incredible marksmanship, making us feel even more sympathy for her as we see that she has even more gifts that the others ignore. Okay, so far we don't really have any of the hero's journey yet, and all we have is a very likeable character who we want to see succeed. That's very simple and comfortable and fleeting, as episode 3 changes all of this by using the first conventions of the hero's journey in a way that's really horrifying and sad. The episode opens with yet another instance of Powder being dismissed, this time by her own sister, Vi. She orders Powder to stay behind whilst the rest of the group go on their most important mission yet. This sends Powder into a spiral of fury that culminates in an important realization. She can harness the power of the magic stones by combining them with her technology, finally creating something that can help the team and prove her value. Before we talk about how this plan pans out though, it's extremely important to first touch upon the Jace subplot happening at the same time. Jace is very much a foil to Powder in this episode. He's also a brilliant inventor, but unlike Powder, he has friends who recognise his promise and want to help him realise his potential. He wants to learn how to tap into the power of the magic stones, just like Powder does, and he succeeds. Right after this happens, Mel and Heimerdinger, both members of the Piltover Council, enter the room and see the proof of Jace's promise, and Mel pledges to support Jace and Victor's future experiments. This is Jace's perfect moment, the moment in which he, the friends who supported him, and the mentor who didn't believe in him, all recognise his potential. We see a tragic inverse of this moment in Powder's story. Powder tries to rescue Vanda and her friends by combining another one of her inventions, her mechanical monkey, with the magic stone to create a weapon, and we really want to see this work, and it does, in the worst possible way. We bear witness to the devastating true power hidden within Powder here, as we see the moment of the explosion several times, each time from a different angle, each one revealing a new, terrible consequence. We've wanted to see Powder unleash her true potential for so long, and now that she's finally done so, we can't help but recoil at the horror of what she's unknowingly unleashed. Contrasting with the weapon's ugly destruction is Powder's peaceful descent. We see a kind of delight in her face that we've never seen before. We're happy to see Powder's greatest moment of triumph, but it's come at a great cost. Moving to the end of the episode, Powder discovers the truth of her intervention, seeing for herself the devastation she caused, and her sister Vi, still struggling with the pain of losing nearly everyone she loves, renounces Powder, calling her a Jinx. Vi then walks away, leaving Powder behind. This is extremely sad, especially as we know how different all of this was from Powder's perspective. This was her greatest moment, and now we're seeing it fall apart. Vi abandons her, and the lonely Powder is soon met by the frightening faces of Silco and his henchmen. We fear the worst, as we've seen the kind of monster Silco is, but Powder hugs him before he can act, and Silco hugs her back. This shot of Silco looking back at Vander's body calls back to his earlier conversation with him, in which Silco reveals to the audience that Vander, his brother, betrayed him. This shot tells us all we need to know here. Silco recognizes the same pain he once felt in Powder now, and he embraces her, becoming her mentor figure. That's right, the villain, this guy, is Powder's mentor figure in her hero's journey, and we might hate that, but there's no denying that he's the mentor she needs. No one knows her pain and how to build something out of it like he does. After the two embrace, we get this haunting final shot of Powder's eye twisting into a hateful, vengeful shape. Silco is offering her a path into a new world, and in this moment we know that she's answered the call of this dark adventure. This is the death of Powder and the birth of Jinx, and Act 1 of Arcane comes to a close. This was the moment in which I went from liking Arcane to wanting to make a video about it. This is the moment in which the show starts Powder's villain origin story, her metamorphosis into Jinx, but it does so using the most important conventions of the first stage of the hero's journey, the meeting with the mentor figure and the decision to embark upon the journey ahead. We feel horrified by what's happened and we pity Powder, but we also recognise that Powder has just tapped into her true potential for the first time and found a mentor figure who'll stay with her and help her refine her gifts. This is a moment of tragedy, but this is also the first major triumph in Powder's hero's journey. This is the first of many moments like this in her story, and all of it creates a unique conflict in how we feel towards her. A conflict that Act 2 further complicates. Act 2 of Arcane jumps ahead in time, introducing us to a very different version of Powder, one who goes by a different name, Jinx. Jinx is a very different character to Powder, and we get our full sense of that during her first scene. She stalks her prey from the shadows, flickering across the camera for half seconds at a time like a horror movie monster, until finally we get the big reveal. A neon graffiti boom logo, accompanied by Jinx, who stealthily straps explosives onto the men while swinging past them. The explosives detonate, and out of the smoke emerges an older Powder. At least that's what we think we see, but when we watch her brutally and efficiently dispatch her enemies with a combination of lethal gadgetry and quick combat, it becomes very clear that this isn't the Powder we once knew. This is Jinx. She's doing some objectively horrible things here, but it's hard not to root for her. She's everything Powder wanted to be. This scene establishes the strength of Jinx, but it also introduces her ultimate flaw, her memory of who she once was. Seeing the sight of a red-haired girl triggers a frighteningly distorted flashback to when Powder was abandoned by Vi, and that makes Jinx lose control. She opens fire on everything around her in a chaotic rampage, and the music becomes frantic, matching Jinx's madness. When it stops, we get this shot of the red-haired girl filling one of Jinx's ammo slots, hammering the point home that it was this reminder of her past that made her lose control. This scene brilliantly frames Jinx's core challenge in the second stage of her inverse hero's journey. She needs to rise above her past before it consumes her present. The second stage of the hero's journey is all about the trials and temptations the hero must overcome, the tests that might break their resolve to continue on their journey, and we see Jinx's journey follow this structure, but this is an inverse hero's journey, so whilst we want Jinx to pass these tests, we also don't. For Jinx to rise above her past and conquer these challenges, she needs to embrace her present. But her present is mainly characterized by murder, destruction, and more murder. To complete her transformation into who she needs to be, she needs to become an even greater villain, and that further complicates our relationship with Jinx. Whenever Jinx succeeds and becomes stronger, more of Powder fades away. We want Jinx to win, but we don't want Powder to lose. Jinx's story in Act 2 tests the audience as much as it tests Jinx. The first test we've seen Jinx face was in her introductory scene in episode 4, and she failed that test when the sight of someone who looked like Vi made her lose control. To make up for that though, she plans and executes her own mission in which she causes some, let's call it extensive collateral damage, as a distraction, allowing her to sneak into the Piltover lab and steal Jason Victor's refined arcane stone. The show doesn't shy away from how morally awful this is. It even has Silco, the main villain, accuse Jinx of going too far. When this is the person telling you you've gone too far, that's extremely worrying. Jinx's endearing response to all of this, though, makes it clear how much this destruction has helped her. Jinx has done something terrible, but it's exactly what she needed to prove to Silco and to us that she is strong enough to both conquer her past and become the Underground's greatest asset. We as an audience are torn. We recognise her evil, but we also recognise how much good it's done her, and we're proud of her. We see her make more personal progress along her hero's journey with each villainous deed, and with every dark step she takes towards her destiny, we become more and more conflicted. In episode 5, Jinx faces another test in the form of the new Arcane stone she stole. I think this stone's a nice metaphor for Jinx herself. We know that Jinx is adept at using technology to harness magical power, like when she accidentally unleashed the power of the stone she found in Act 1, but that stone was volatile. The power it released was impressive, but without focus, kind of like powder. But this stone is much more refined, and has the promise of far greater power, like Jinx. Her efforts to tap into its power unleashed too much of it, triggering an explosion very much like the one from her original bomb, and the trauma from that experience eats away at her. We see the pain that Powder's memory brings to Jinx, and we want her to be rid of it, even if it means losing Powder. She tries to overcome this challenge by fighting it on its own terms, like when she revisits Vi's punch machine from Act 1. Jinx tries to make her pain her strength, focusing on it and letting it power her punches, but her efforts to conquer her past this way fail, and she still can't beat Vi's record. Jinx leaves the machine still carrying the weight of Powder. Later in the episode, she tries to purge Powder from her soul forever by participating in Silco's frightening, evil version of a baptism. This is yet another convention from the hero's journey, the spiritual death and rebirth of the hero, but again, Arcane twists it and uses it for a different purpose. This is the spiritual death of Powder and the beginning of Jinx's full rebirth. We might initially see this as a tragic moment in which the last vestiges of Powder start to fade away, but that feeling quickly subsides as we see how much Jinx flourishes as a result of this. Jinx returns to the stone and she handles the outpouring of energy with a deft hand, controlling the outburst. She has control over herself, and subsequently she has much more control over the stone. We can't help but be proud of Jinx here. Jinx's spiritual rebirth is a classic hero's journey moment, but it's slightly undermined by its dark implications. Jinx has just seen proof that killing Powder is the path to her true power, and Silco is now one step closer to having magical weapons at his disposal, which is really not a great situation for anyone. It's hard to decide how to feel about Jinx here. She's descending deeper into her own darkness and losing her light, but she's also bringing out more of her own potential and conquering all that held her back for so long. She's emerging as a hero in her story, but she's becoming even more of a villain in the process, purging any of the good that's still left in her. The biggest moment of the second stage of the hero's journey is when the hero is faced with their greatest challenge yet, and we see that in Jinx's inverse hero's journey in episode 6. This is the crescendo of Jinx's story in Act 2, the return of Vi. Jinx lights the flare that Vi gave her all the way back in Act 1, a flare that she was told to light if she ever needed Vi to find her. We've been waiting for Vi and Jinx to reunite for a while now, hoping that these two characters can repair their broken bond, but the episode makes clear that Jinx's decision to call out to Vi is a failure, not a triumph. This is Jinx failing her ultimate test. She's trying to return to her past. We watch as Jinx is shattered by the ghosts of friends that Powder failed to save, reminding us that whilst we want Jinx and Vi to reunite, this is hurting her. Another sequence plays out at the same time as this one, reinforcing the idea that Jinx's attempt to return to her past is a mistake. We see a sequence of Piltover blockading its borders, signalling a major change in the relationship between the underground and the city, the kind of change that can't be reversed. We're seeing the story world of Arcane take a step towards a bleaker future, whilst literally blocking off any hope of a return to its brighter past, and that massively contrasts with what we're seeing Jinx try to do. Jinx is making a mistake here. We get a much stronger sense of this when Jinx and Vi finally reunite. Whilst Jinx is waiting for Vi, this crow appears, and we've seen crows appear around Jinx before, like the one that stares at her in this scene. We also see it later during her fight with Echo, appearing above her like it's a part of her aura. In a lot of stories, crows are often ill omens, creatures that curse everything they find with the promise of death, and the show's made an effort to align them with Jinx, someone who was born in death, and branded a curse by friends, family, and later herself. This crow stays as an onlooker for much of the scene to come, a reminder to the audience of who Jinx has become. When Vi finally meets Jinx, Jinx softens and shares a tender moment with her, but not before her mind starts to spiral again. Her fragile psyche starts to splinter, and seeing Caitlyn with Vi only makes this worse. We're extremely happy to see them together again, but Jinx's growing madness makes clear that this is hurting her. Their reunion is interrupted by Echo and the Firelights. In the ensuing fight, Vi sees how much Jinx has changed. She's enjoying herself here, proving her prowess as an architect of death. When Vi is taken at the end of the scene, Jinx has to relive the experience of losing her sister, and the episode closes on a shot of Jinx in a state of maddening fury. I know, the first impression we get from this scene is how poignant it is, how these two sisters came so close to reconciliation, and then that possibility was taken away as quickly as it came. But I think this scene's a tragic victory in the context of Jinx's inverse hero's journey. Vi is Jinx's ultimate test in this part of her journey. Vi is the only person who has the power to bring an end to Jinx's story, and Jinx starts the scene by succumbing to Vi's influence, and Powder starts to resurface. But as the fight develops, the bloodlust restores Jinx and puts her back in control. The episode ends on a note of tragedy for the audience and for Jinx, but in the context of her inverse hero's journey, it's a triumph. Throughout Jinx's story, we felt conflicted. The sympathetic story structure of the hero's journey has brought us close to her, but we've struggled with the moral territory of her victories, as all of them have had really dark consequences that have hurt a lot of people. But it's during Act 3 of Arcane that Jinx's story tests us the most. As a quick refresher, during Stage 3 of the hero's journey, the hero undergoes a profound transformation after surviving the tests of the second stage, and after this, they face one last test, triumphing over it and proving their mastery of themselves. We see a twisted version of these conventions in the final stage of Jinx's journey, and they take her to a final destination that's as unexpected as it is devastating. When we meet Jinx again in Act 3, she's the most unstable she's ever been. Her confusion over Caitlyn gives rise to a mad jealousy within her, one that weakens her hold over her sanity even more. After she loses her fight with Echo and survives the explosion of her own bomb, Silco takes her to his other scientist, Singed, who plans to treat her wounds by exposing her to the highly volatile Shimmer drug. The growing split in Jinx's psyche was accelerated by her encounter with Vi and Caitlyn, and now it's exacerbated by the Shimmer coursing through her, and she starts to see vivid hallucinations of Powder being killed and replaced, and of Caitlyn taunting and torturing her. Jinx undergone a startling transformation, and now she is ready for her final test. After kidnapping Caitlyn, Vi and Silco, she brings them together at a table she's set, at the site of where Vi abandoned her all those years ago. Ornamenting the table are broken relics from Powder's past. She made this table a representation of her shattered mindscape, the struggle between Jinx and Powder that perpetually torments her. As she talks to Vi about the day she lost her, we see an audience of crows land above them. We've never seen this many all at once. It's almost like they're gathering together to see the moment another omen of death and destruction is born. Jinx reveals that she's created all of this to test Vi, to see if she'll kill Caitlyn to bring back Powder, or leave her and let her embrace Jinx, but this test soon escapes her control. Vi and Silco both make their attempts to break through to her, but Vi's efforts to recall the past and appeal to Powder hurt Jinx, conjuring up nightmarish phantoms of friends and family long gone, phantoms that push and press her into the ground. We've seen this before. We've seen so much evidence of Powder being Jinx's ultimate weakness, the source of her instability, and here the effect it has on her is so intense that it almost crushes her. Silco frantically tries to stop Vi, but before he gets the chance to, Jinx accidentally kills him. When the shot's fired, all of the crows leave. They don't need to be here anymore, as whatever they've come to witness is done. Jinx's inverse hero's journey is about to draw to an end. Listen to the sound effect that plays after Jinx stops crying. We hear the muffled sound of voices in Jinx's head, but they're dialed down and they don't disturb her. Throughout Jinx's journey, we've seen her wrestle with voices in her head, voices she can't control, and that was always indicative of her fractured sense of self, but here she's in full control. She's silenced her inner chaos as she knows who she is now. She sits in a seat adorned with crow feathers, the seat of Jinx. In her final moment in Season 1, she completes her journey by taking the Arcane Stone and channeling its full power through her weapon, the greatest demonstration of her intellect. She takes aim at the Piltover capital, drawing forth the full power of the arcane energy, and fires. As the rocket flies towards its target, we watch as the council vote to bring an end to the Piltover underground conflict forever, creating peace in a world that has never known it. But Jinx has stopped that from ever happening, killing everyone's hopes with one shot, jinxing everyone's dreams. This is her worst crime, but it's also the ultimate assertion of her identity. Jinx's rocket launcher is her most iconic weapon in the League of Legends game, her signature move. This is the first time she's done it in the series. Jinx finally knows who she is, and her hero's journey is complete, but all of this has come at a devastating cost. We watch as Jinx emerges as the hero in her story, and as the villain in everyone else's. And with that, so concludes the masterfully told story of Jinx in Season 1 of Arcane. We've watched as a young, timid child went on her own hero's journey, and we grew close to her as she slowly started to realise her potential, overcoming her weaknesses with the help of her mentor, and becoming someone with talent, someone with purpose. We've seen the evil she's done, but we always knew what it meant to her story, and that tempered our judgment, all the way up to her final act, her darkest deed that killed everyone's hopes, and made clear why the theme song of the show has these lyrics as the chorus: "Everybody wants to be my enemy." These lyrics are about Jinx, and I think the slightly sympathetic leaning they have represents what we feel towards her, even now. Jinx's journey is not only one of the most challenging character stories put to screen, but it's also one of the most inventive uses of the hero's journey framework, making us see a hero in a villain, and I think her story is a key part of why Arcane is not only a shining light in the world of animation, but also a stunning monument to the power of serious, intelligent storytelling. I can't wait to see where Jinx's story goes next. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like and commenting about anything I could do differently, or any ideas you might have for what I could do in the future. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more, please consider subscribing so you can check those videos out when they come out, and also, whilst you're waiting, you can check out some of my other videos too. Don't forget to hit that bell icon, and I'll see you all in the next one.